mountain road had been the same for hours, same turn, same cluster of crooked pine trees leaning over the asphalt like they were eavesdropping. The same chipped road sign, bent as if it had been struck decades ago. I'd swear I passed it 6 times, maybe more. My GPS had stopped updating an hour earlier. No signal, just that glowing red X over a frozen map that mocked me every time I glanced down. The deeper I drove, the heavier the air felt, not just humid, but thick, like it was filling my lungs with something heavier than oxygen. The night didn't look like any night I'd ever seen. The darkness wasn't an absence of light, it was a presence. It clung to the windshield, refusing to let my headlights go beyond a certain point. I pressed the accelerator harder, telling myself it was just fatigue, but then, after yet another curve that I knew I'd already taken, I saw it through the fog that had begun to creep across the road like pale, crawling fingers. A cabin. It was impossible. There were no cabins on this road. I'd driven here before, years ago, on a summer trip. No homes, no lights. No reason for anyone to be up here this far into the mountain. Yet there it was, squat, dark, and leaning ever so slightly to the left, as if gravity had been pulling at it for years. A single lantern burned in the window, its light warm but strangely wrong, too still, too steady. I told myself I wouldn't stop. I told myself I'd keep driving, but my hands, they had other plans. My knuckles loosened on the steering wheel, my foot eased off the gas, and before I realized it, I was pulling into a dirt clearing right in front of the cabin. The gravel crunched under my tires in slow, deliberate pops. The sound echoed longer than it should have, fading into the woods like something was listening and didn't want to forget the noise. When I stepped out of the car, the cold hit me like a memory. It wasn't the sharp, crisp kind of cold you feel in the mountains, no. It was the kind that seeps into your bones, as if it knows you've been carrying too much warmth, too much life, and it wants to drain you of both. The fog wrapped itself around my legs, thicker than it had any right to be. It didn't just move with the wind, it curled, like it was watching. The wooden porch creaked as I stepped onto it. I paused, half expecting the lantern to flicker or the door to swing open, but nothing happened. The silence was pure, not just an absence of noise. No insects, no rustle of leaves, no far-off animal calls, just nothing. I knocked once. The sound didn't echo the way it should have. It felt swallowed, as if the cabin itself absorbed it. The door wasn't locked. When I pushed it open, the smell hit me immediately. Damp wood, mold, and something metallic. Iron, maybe, or blood. The air inside was heavier than outside, like it had been trapped for years and didn't want me breathing it in. My boots thudded against the warped floorboards, each step too loud, too alone, and that's when it hit me. But house was listening. Asterisk, the walls seemed to lean inward, their shadows moving in ways the lantern light didn't explain. There was no visible source for the light inside, yet everything was dimly illuminated in a dull, amber glow that didn't feel like it belonged to any flame I knew. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, not pushed to a table, not against a wall, just there, facing the wrong way, toward the corner. The wood was worn, and deep grooves scarred the seat, as if someone had dug their nails into it over and over. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. I told myself I'd just look around, maybe call out to see if anyone was home. But then, that sound came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. A low hum, steady, without melody, without emotion. It was coming from somewhere deeper inside. Should have left, you know that, right? You're probably thinking it. Why didn't you turn around? But there's something you don't understand. The hum wasn't just in the air. It was inside my chest. It matched my heartbeat, like it was syncing with me. I stepped forward, each movement making the floor complain under my weight. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. My eyes traced the warped wallpaper, its faded floral patterns looking more like veins than flowers in this light. Halfway down, the hum stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound had. My ears rang, my skin prickled, and for a moment I felt like I was the only thing in the house, the only thing in existence. That's when I saw the door. It wasn't like the others. While most of the wood inside was cracked, faded, and weather-worn, this one looked new, smooth, polished, untouched. And worse, it had no handle, just a small keyhole in the center, too low to be comfortable for any normal door. I knelt to look through it. The smell hit me first, stronger than before, metallic, damp. My stomach turned before my eyes even adjusted to the darkness beyond. And then I saw it. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I know what I saw. An eye, not human, wider, darker, and filled with something that wasn't hate. Wasn't fear, it was hunger. I jerked back, my heart hammering. The hum returned instantly, louder now, coming from inside the door. That was when I realized the door wasn't keeping me out, it was keeping something in. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the wood as if breaking contact would let it move. My heel caught on something, and I stumbled, hitting the wall. And that's when the lantern in the window went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I could still feel the hum in my ribs. Faster now, almost matching my panic. My hand scrambled along the wall, searching for the door I'd entered through. The wood under my fingers felt damp now, like it was sweating. Something moved behind me, not footsteps, not breathing, just movement, in the way the air shifted. As if something had entered the space I occupied. I didn't dare turn around. I just pushed forward, hands searching, until my palm found the edge of the doorframe. I threw myself through it and landed outside. The cold night air rushed back into my lungs, and for a moment I thought I was safe. But then, the cabin was gone. Behind me, where it had stood moments ago, there was only a wall of black. Trees, swaying gently in a wind I couldn't feel. And somewhere in those trees, the hum followed me. The trees were too still. That's the first thing I noticed after the cabin vanished, even with my breath making small clouds in the air and the faint rustle of leaves in the distance. The trunks closest to me stood frozen. No sway, no whisper, no life. I told myself the logical thing was to retrace my steps, find the trail I'd taken up here. But the moment I turned, I realized I had no memory of a trail. I couldn't even recall walking toward the cabin earlier. My brain scrambled for the memory, but all I could find was the sound that hummed out. It wasn't behind me anymore, it was ahead. You'd think that would make me stop, I know you would, but here's the truth. When the forest is watching you, standing still feels worse than moving. The air grew denser the farther I walked, like wading through invisible water. My boots pressed into a thin layer of frost, each step releasing a faint crackle that echoed far too loudly. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd catch sight of something just at the edge of my vision. That's when I saw the first set of eyes. They glowed faintly between the trees, low to the ground, unmoving. They didn't blink. I thought it was an animal at first, maybe a deer, but then a second pair appeared above them, far higher, at least 8 feet up. Both pairs stayed fixed on me, perfectly aligned. I don't know if you've ever been stared at by something you can't name. It doesn't feel like fear, it feels like ownership. I moved faster, my breath ragged in the cold, the frost underfoot turning into a thin crunch of snow. The sound of my own footsteps was joined by something else, a second rhythm, matching mine perfectly, only slightly delayed. The forest seemed to tighten around me. The gaps between the trees narrowed, their branches bending in ways that didn't look natural. One brushed against my shoulder, and for a moment I could swear I felt fingers in the texture of the bark. The hum grew stronger. It wasn't a sound now, it was inside my head, threading itself between my thoughts. It whispered without words, pulling me forward until I stumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood an old well. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Moss creeping up its stones, the rope long rotted away. But there was no snow inside the ring of stones around it. The ground was bare, damp, as if something had been breathing there. I stepped closer. The air smelled like rust and wet earth. Then I heard it faint, but clear. My own voice. It was coming from the well. It wasn't echoing, wasn't distorted. It was me, speaking in a low, urgent tone, saying words I couldn't understand. I leaned over the edge, and the sound stopped instantly. The bottom was too dark to see. A gust of wind came from inside, cold, damp, wrong. It slid up my spine like an icy hand. My fingers twitched involuntarily toward the edge, as if something wanted me to climb in. Then, from the darkness, something moved. Not fast, not sudden, just a slow, deliberate shift. And as it moved, I saw them, the same 2 sets of eyes from the forest, now looking up at me from inside the well. The hum surged, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just in my chest anymore. It was coming from the ground beneath me, from the trees around me, from inside me. I backed away, my boots slipping on the damp earth, my arms flailing for balance, and that's when I saw the shapes in the tree line. Figures, dozens of them. They were tall, impossibly thin, their limbs too long, their heads cocked at sharp, unnatural angles. They stood in perfect stillness, every one of them watching me. The well behind me breathed again. I didn't wait to see what came out. I ran, branches tore at my jacket, snagged my hair, but I didn't stop. I could hear them moving now, not running, not chasing, just keeping pace, like they were herding me. And then, far ahead, I saw it. A light. Not the warm glow of a lantern, not the harsh white of a flashlight. This was different, pale, bluish, like moonlight that had forgotten how to be gentle. I don't know why, but I ran toward it. Maybe you think that was stupid, maybe you're right, but in that moment, it felt like the only way out. When I broke through the tree line, into the source of the light, I froze. It wasn't safety, it wasn't salvation, it was the cabin only. It wasn't where it had been before, and this time, it was waiting with the door wide open. The cabin's door stood open like a mouth caught mid-breath. I should have stopped right there. I should have turned back into the woods, even with those things behind me. But there's a pull to an open doorway when you're cold, hunted, and desperately looking for anything that resembles shelter. The light spilling out wasn't firelight. It had that same pale blue hue I'd seen in the clearing, soft enough to blur the edges of the walls, yet sharp enough to make every shadow feel like it was watching. I stepped inside. The air was warmer, but not in a way that made sense. It was the kind of warmth you feel in the presence of something breathing very close to you. The door swung shut on its own with a slow, deliberate creak. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not musty, not rotten, it was like rain hitting hot metal, tinged with something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit left in the sun. The second thing I noticed was the sound. It wasn't the hum anymore. It was a low, steady pulse, almost like a heartbeat, but faster. Too fast to be human. The walls didn't match what I remembered from earlier. The cabin seemed larger inside now, the corners stretching farther than they should, as though the geometry had been altered. A hallway I didn't recall now extended into darkness. My boot sank slightly into the floorboards as if the wood had softened. Each step left an impression, a faint dip that didn't bounce back. There were objects scattered around, but none of them made sense together. An antique phonograph with no record, a porcelain doll missing its eyes, a teacup filled to the brim with black liquid that rippled even though I wasn't moving it. On the far wall, a mirror hung crooked. The glass wasn't reflective, not in the normal way. It shimmered faintly, as though it were filled with liquid silver, and in its surface, I saw something that wasn't me, that it had my shape, my posture, but the face was wrong, too smooth, too pale. My eyes were black from corner to corner, and the mouth was smiling. I stepped back, but the reflection didn't. My chest tightened. There's something unnatural about realizing your reflection is no longer yours. My instinct screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't move, like the floor had decided to keep me. Somewhere down the hallway, I heard a door creak open. The sound was slow, hesitant, but purposeful, as if it wanted me to hear. I turned toward it, but the hallway seemed longer now. The walls bent inward, making the space feel narrower the farther I looked. The pulse in the air quickened, matching the speed of my own heart. Against all reason, I walked toward the sound. My fingers brushed the walls as I moved. They were warm, not just warm, they throbbed, like muscle under skin. Halfway down, I passed another door. This one was shut, but as I moved past, something pressed against it from the other side. Once, hard enough to make the wood groan. I didn't stop to see what it was. At the end of the hallway, a faint light spilled out from the cracked door I'd heard earlier. I pushed it open. The room inside was small, almost bare, except for one thing, a table, and on the table, a box. The box was made of dark wood, carved with strange patterns that seemed to shift if I looked at them too long. A thin trail of frost crept outward from its base, spider-webbing across the tabletop. I reached out, not because I wanted to, but because my body seemed to decide for me. The moment my fingertips brushed the lid, I heard it again. My voice. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the well. It was coming from inside the box. I pulled my hand back, my pulse racing. The air felt heavier, like the room was holding its breath. Then the box began to open on its own. A thin crack split the lid, and a whisper slipped out so soft I almost thought I imagined it. It said my name. Not in a question, not in greeting. It said my name like it was claiming ownership. Something shifted in the shadows behind me. I turned and saw that the doorway I'd just come through was gone. In its place was another wall, smooth and seamless, as if no door had ever existed there. I wasn't in the cabin anymore, at least. Not the version of it I'd entered. The walls seemed closer now. Not just closer, they leaned in, as if they were waiting for me to make the wrong move. The box on the table kept its small crack open, enough for the whisper to keep sliding through like smoke. My name, over and over. Slower this time, almost savoring the syllables. I should have backed away. I should have shut my eyes, covered my ears, done anything except what I did next. I leaned closer. It wasn't curiosity. Not exactly. It felt like compulsion, like being drawn to the edge of a cliff just to see how far down it goes. The air around the box was colder now, but my skin burned with each breath I took. Inside the narrow slit of the lid, I could see movement, not a shape, more like the suggestion of one swirling inside a darkness so deep it seemed thicker than shadow. The whisper wasn't echoing, it was layered, like many voices speaking in perfect unison. "Do you remember?" it asked. That's when my stomach dropped. It wasn't just saying my name anymore, it was talking to me. I swallowed, the sound loud in the stillness. "Remember what?" I whispered back, because apparently my common sense had died somewhere between the hallway and here. The box shivered. The frost spread faster, racing across the table and dripping to the floor in thin, glassy icicles. That said something else then, something I don't think I'll ever be able to repeat exactly. Not because I forgot, but because the words didn't belong to any language humans speak. Still, somehow, I understood that it was telling me about the night I died. My pulse hammered in my ears. "I'm not dead," I said aloud, but the sound of my own voice felt wrong, like it was coming from somewhere slightly behind me. The box chuckled. That's the only way I can describe it. A low, almost tender laugh that still made my teeth hurt to hear. Then the room changed again. The floor beneath me rippled like water, and the table sank halfway into it, the box remaining perfectly level. The walls twisted, bending into impossible angles that made my eyes water just looking at them. The ceiling seemed too far away now, like the sky had replaced it, and in the corners, those deep, yawning corners, I saw them. Figures still, watching their outlines wavered like heat, haze, but the eyes didn't move. The whisper from the box grew sharper. "You came back here once before," it said, "and you left something behind." "I don't know what you're talking about," I told it, but my voice cracked, betraying me. One of the figures in the corner shifted, almost imperceptibly. A pale hand, impossibly long fingers, curling and uncurling like it was remembering how to move. The box's lid opened wider, but there was no hinge, no sound of wood. It was as if the top peeled back like skin. Inside wasn't empty. There was me, a version of me, crumpled and motionless, eyes shut, lips moving like it was whispering something in its sleep. The air thickened with the smell of wet soil and iron. My vision swam, and I stumbled backward, but my shoulders hit a wall that hadn't been there before. The box's voice dropped to a near growl. "Take it back," it said. "Take it back or stay." I shook my head, not understanding. "Take what back?" The box went silent, and then a diversion of me inside the box opened its eyes. They were pitch black. The walls shuddered, like the whole cabin had taken a breath, and the shadows in the corners began to move forward. That was when I realized whatever I'd left behind here wasn't an object. It was a part of me, and it wanted me to stay so it could take the rest. You probably think I'm exaggerating when I say I could hear the cabin breathing, but it's the truth. It was subtle at first, a slow, almost imperceptible expansion and contraction in the wood, like the inhale and exhale of something ancient and patient. I sat on the edge of the bed, my knees pulled tight against my chest, straining to hear beyond the crackle of the old fireplace. That's when I realized there was another sound beneath it, a layered hum, almost like a voice trying to push through the grain of the walls. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear enough to be certain. But my brain latched onto those words instantly, because deep down, I knew they were meant for me. The wind outside rattled the shutters, but it was weaker now, as if the storm that had trapped me here was dying down. That should have been good news, but it wasn't, because if the storm let up, I'd have no excuse not to leave, and something inside this place didn't want me gone. I remembered the thing I'd felt earlier in the hallway, walking through an invisible membrane of heat, as if a living presence had brushed past me. It wasn't just in my head. The cabin was aware of me, and it was speaking. I got up slowly and pressed my ear to the wall. The wood was warmer than it should have been, as if there were a fire burning on the other side. But it was the middle of the cabin, there was no other side, and under that heat was a vibration, faint but unmistakable, like the purr of a predator that knows you're trapped. The whispers grew clearer. At first they were just fragments, words like "stay deeper, mine," but then, between the crackles and pops of the timber, came the unmistakable rhythm of breathing, long, patient inhalations. I stepped back. My heartbeat was climbing into my throat. I turned toward the hallway, thinking I might try the front door again, storm or no storm. But as I took a step, the whisper stopped. The entire cabin went silent, in that suffocating, heavy way that makes your ears ring, and then 3 slow knocks from inside the wall. The sound came from my left, just beneath the mounted deer head. It was too deliberate to be settling wood, too aware I froze. If I moved, I'd make noise. If I didn't move, whatever was on the other side would know exactly where I was. My own breathing sounded deafening. Then, a new sound, a long, dragging scrape, as if nails or claws were tracing the beams inside the wall, moving toward me. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the oil lamp and backed into the hallway. Every step I took made the floorboards groan, and I swear I felt something in the wood react to the sound, like it was tracking me through vibrations. That was when I noticed something I hadn't before: hairline cracks running along the walls, jagged and branching like veins. I leaned in, and my stomach turned inside those cracks, faintly glowing. It was something like pulsing amber light, that it wasn't reflection. It was alive. The whispers returned, but now they were in a chorus, dozens of overlapping voices, all whispering, in tones that made my skin crawl. They weren't speaking English anymore, or maybe they never had. The language was guttural, wet, almost hungry. And then, one of them did speak in English, just once, right in my ear. "Don't leave me." I spun around, but the hallway was empty. That's when I realized the voices weren't in the walls. They were the walls. The glow inside the cracks pulsed faster now, in rhythm with my heartbeat. My lamp flickered. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, as if the cabin was inhaling and refusing to exhale. I stumbled toward the front door, desperate. My hand touched a handle, cold as ice this time. I pulled. Didn't move, not even a rattle. The voices rose in pitch, turning into a high, insect-like chittering that made my teeth ache. Behind me, the boards creaked on underweight, but like they were bending, flexing inward. And then the walls began to close. It was subtle, an almost imperceptible shift, but I could see the seams of the room narrowing. The mounted deer head tilted slightly, like it was watching me. I tried the handle again, slamming my shoulder into the door, but it didn't give. Something warm and wet dripped from above, splashing onto my wrist. I looked up. The ceiling was weeping. Thick, dark liquid seeped between the beams, falling in slow drops. It smelled like iron. The whispers came again, louder than before, layered over one another in a suffocating wave of sound. My vision swam. I could feel the cabin pressing in around me, squeezing, trying to force me deeper inside. And in that moment I understood. It didn't just want me to stay. It wanted to make me part of it. The cabin was trying to consume me. That thought wasn't metaphor anymore, it was fact. Every instinct screamed that I needed to find space, somewhere it couldn't press in from all sides. But the more I moved, the more it felt like the hallway rearranged itself behind me, subtly closing off the routes I thought I knew. I kept my hand on the wall for balance, though it was a mistake because the wood was warm, not the cozy warmth of a fire, but the fevered heat of flesh. I yanked my hand away, but for a split second I could swear the wall held onto me, like a tongue to frozen skin in reverse. The glow inside the cracks, those pulsing amber veins, was stronger here. I followed them, hoping they might lead me to, I don't know, an exit, a weakness. But they led me somewhere else entirely. Halfway down the hall, the lines of light dipped toward the floor, tracing an outline I'd never noticed before, an uneven square in the baseboards. A trapdoor. The whispers shifted when I found it. They grew softer, more measured, as though negotiating. My skin prickled. Whatever was down there, it wanted me to find it. I knelt, running my fingers along the seams. There was no handle, just a recessed groove. My nails caught on it, and I pulled. It resisted, like something on the other side was holding it shut, then gave way with a dull, wet pop. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, copper, and something sweeter, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. I lowered the lamp into the opening. The light caught on something slick, something that shifted just out of sight. The stairs were narrow, uneven, and seemed to descend much farther than the cabin's footprint should have allowed. The voices were clearer now. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was inviting, like a mother's voice calling a child to bed. I don't know why I stepped down. Maybe curiosity really does rot the mind when fear takes too long to kill you. Or maybe the cabin didn't give me a choice. The temperature dropped as I descended. Each step groaned under my weight, but the sound didn't echo like the air was swallowing it whole. Halfway down, I ran my hand along the wall to steady myself. That's when I realized the wood here was different. The grain wasn't straight, it spiraled, like muscle fibers twisting together, and when I pressed harder it gave. I pulled my hand back. There was a faint oily residue on my palm. The bottom of the stairs opened into a narrow tunnel, just high enough for me to walk hunched over. The walls glistened, breathing faintly, and in places, they shivered as if reacting to my presence. At the far end of the tunnel was a door, not wood, not metal. It looked grown, like bone, curved and fused into a frame. The lamp flickered violently. The whispers stopped. That silence was worse than the voices. It was heavy, expectant, like something on the other side of that door was listening to me breathe. I reached out without meaning to, fingertips brushing the surface. It was warm, and it pulsed. The instant I touched it, the whispers returned, every one of them screaming, overlapping in a deafening chorus that rattled my skull. My knees buckled. The lamp nearly fell from my grip, but then a sliver of the door began to peel away, curling back like soft bark, revealing a black gap no bigger than my fist. From that gap, a rush of air poured out, cold enough to sting my skin, carrying with it the smell of damp stone and something much older. And then I heard it, a single voice, clear as day, speaking from inside the darkness. Come home. I don't remember deciding to crawl through, but somehow my shoulders were pressing into the gap, squeezing into a space that shouldn't have fit me. The cold deepened, numbing my fingers, until I tumbled out into a space that didn't belong under a cabin in the mountains. The room was impossibly large. My lamp's light stretched only so far before being swallowed by shadows, but I could see shapes, columns that might have been trees, except they pulsed faintly with the same amber light I'd seen in the walls above. And between them, movement. Something crawled there, keeping low, its limbs too long for its body. Every time my light shifted, it stopped, tilting its head, not in curiosity, but in recognition. There was a sound like a wet cloth tearing, and another figure emerged from the far side, then another. They weren't separate, they were connected, to the walls, the floor, even each other, thin fibrous strands stretching from their backs into the pulsing columns. Like marionettes attached to their puppeteer, I stumbled backward, my lamp trembling in my grip. The figures moved closer, but their movements were slow, deliberate, almost reverent. One of them reached forward, its hand, if you could call it, that wasn't flesh. It was layered wood and sinew, bending unnaturally as it brushed my sleeve. The whispers weren't in my ears anymore. They were inside my skull, words I couldn't block out, words telling me I'd been expected, that I'd been chosen, and somewhere, in that dark expanse, a deeper voice rose above them all. You've already been here. My stomach turned cold because somehow, I knew it was true. The moment I heard that voice, deep, resonant, heavy enough to vibrate in my bones, something inside me shifted. Not in the way you might shift your weight to stand steadier. No, this was deeper. Something in my memory, my sense of self, had been nudged out of alignment. I didn't know if the voice had put something there, or taken something away. You've already been here. The words kept repeating in my mind, but they weren't just echoes, they were memories. Faint impressions I didn't know I had. Flashes of this same room, but I wasn't holding a lamp. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't myself. The shapes that crawled toward me moved in unison now, as if coordinated by a single thought. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, scraping the pulsing floor. The fibers tethering them to the columns quivered each time they shifted, like some great lung, inhaling through 100 chords. The lamp's flame guttered low. My fingers tightened on the handle, but the air was so cold now I could see my breath in pale ribbons. Then the storm returned. At first, I thought it was the wind forcing its way down through cracks in the cabin floor above, but it was too heavy, too deliberate. The sound came from everywhere at once, rolling like thunder and yet wet, churning, as if rain were falling inside my skull. The creatures didn't flinch. Instead, their heads turned in perfect unison toward a shape emerging in the distance. I couldn't see it clearly at first. The shadows seemed to bend around it, hiding its outline. But as it came closer, my chest tightened. It was tall, not just in a human sense, but tall like a tree, like a tower. Limbs long and rooted into the ground, the body narrowing into something that might have been a torso or might have been a trunk. From it, dozens of thin strands stretched into the walls and ceiling, pulsing in time with the columns. When it moved, the whole chamber seemed to sway, and then it spoke again, without a mouth, without breath. You ran last time. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell this thing I had never been here, that I was just some lost fool stumbling through a nightmare cabin in the mountains. But the words wouldn't form, because in the deepest part of my mind, I remembered running, not from the cabin, from it. The figures surrounding me stepped back, creating a narrow path toward the towering shape. Not in hostility, this felt like a ceremony. The storm above raged harder. I could hear beams groaning, wood splintering. The cabin's weight pressed down as if it were leaning in to listen. I took a step forward without meaning to. My boots sank slightly into the floor, which gave like damp earth. The cold intensified until my teeth ached. The tall shape lowered, something toward me, a limb, or maybe a root. As it came closer, I saw that it was covered in a rough, bark-like texture, split split in places to reveal the same amber glow that filled the veins in the cabin walls above it. Stopped inches from my chest. The voice came again, inside my head. You can't leave until it's finished. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't obey. The glow from its limb brightened, and with it, the whispers in my skull multiplied, overlapping voices speaking in languages I didn't know. All at once, and then, a sudden pressure like invisible hands pressing against my temples. My vision blurred. I wasn't in the chamber anymore. I was on the mountainside, snow whipping into my face. The cabin was behind me, but it looked different, older, sagging, almost abandoned. My own hands were bloody, and someone was screaming my name from inside. A flash, then I was back in the chamber, knees buckling. The tall shape loomed over me. The whispers stopped. The storm quieted to a low, distant hum. It leaned closer, not with menace, but with inevitability, and, in the dim amber light, I understood. It didn't want to kill me, it wanted me to remember. The moment I realized it wanted me to remember, not destroy me, was somehow worse than anything else. Because memories aren't always truth, they can be traps. And in that chamber, I knew that whatever this towering thing would show me, it would be impossible to unsee. The limor root hovered inches from my forehead. The amber glow within it pulsed once, twice, and then surged like a heartbeat. When it touched my skin, heat spread instantly, searing down to the marrow. I didn't scream, though every nerve told me I should. I was frozen in the way a rabbit freezes when it knows the fox's teeth are already closing. And then I was somewhere else again. The mountainside this time, not the cabin. I stood in a dimly lit hallway lined with warped wood paneling. The smell of damp rot thick in the air. The light came from a single flickering bulb at the far end, swaying on a wire. I recognized the shape of the hallway before I even knew why it was inside the cabin. But longer, impossibly long. My own footsteps echoed far more than they should have, as if the floorboards were hollow. With each step, I heard faint knocking. Beneath me, not rhythmic, desperate. I reached for the nearest door, its surface swollen with moisture, paint peeling away in white strips. My fingers touched the knob, and the knocking stopped. Don't open it. The voice wasn't behind me. It was inside the wood, muffled and shaking. I let go of the knob, heart pounding. The light flickered harder now, buzzing, in the shadows. Between each flash of illumination, the hallway seemed to bend, curving downward as if I were walking inside the spine of some enormous animal. When I turned, the hallway behind me was gone, just blackness, swallowing everything but the sound of my own breathing. No choice but forward. Halfway down, I noticed something seeping through the cracks in the boards along the right-hand wall. At first I thought it was water, but it was too thick, too dark. I knelt, touched it. It clung to my skin like oil, warm, pulsing faintly, in sync with that same impossible heartbeat I'd heard in the chamber. The bulb ahead of me went out, total darkness. For a moment I thought I'd gone blind, but slowly, my eyes adjusted not to light, but to movement. Shapes began to form in the blackness, rippling like they were submerged in water. They weren't in the hallway with me, they were the hallway. Faces stretched from the walls, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide and unblinking. And then the knocking returned, this time, from inside the walls all around me. I stumbled forward, panic rising like bile, my fingers grazing the wood for balance. It was warm now, too warm. When I finally reached the end, there was no door, just a narrow archway leading into a room lit by a cold blue light. The smell hit me first, iron and something sweet. Rotting. In the center of the room stood a chair, and on it, me. At least, I thought it was me. The figure's head was lowered, hands bound to the armrests with something that looked like sinew. The skin was pale, almost translucent, veins tracing dark lines beneath the surface. I stepped closer. The figure lifted its head slowly, and my own face stared back, lips moving without sound. I bent down, trying to read the shape of the words, and just before I could, the blue light flared and the scene shattered. I was back in the chamber, gasping. The tall figure's limb withdrew, the glow dimming. The others, the bent-limbed shapes tethered to the columns, were closer now, watching with tilted heads. The storm above us was louder than ever. The voice returned. You know now, you can't undo it. I tried to speak, to ask what it wanted me to do, but the words felt like they dissolved in my throat before they could escape. The figure shifted, and the ground trembled beneath me. The amber veins in the walls brightened, and the sound of splintering wood echoed above. The cabin was breaking. I had the sudden, absolute certainty that if I stayed another moment, the floor would give way entirely and I would be part of whatever fed those roots, those veins. But the path back was gone. The chamber had no exit. Though the voice came one final time, If you leave, you'll take it with you. I stood there, heart hammering, staring at the massive figure as its words bled into my skull. If you leave, you'll take it with you. The chamber around me was alive now, throbbing like the inside of something that had been sleeping for too long. The amber veins pulsed faster, shadows shifting in time with the sound, as though the whole place was breathing. The others, the tethered shapes, were still watching. I realized with a cold shock that they weren't standing. They were hanging, suspended by thick cords of the same sinewy matter that bound their necks and wrists. Their feet dangled just above the stone floor, toes twitching in lazy, unconscious spasms, and one of them was moving more than the rest. I took a hesitant step toward it. Its head lolled forward, but as I drew near, it snapped up, eyes wide, mouth gaping too wide. Its voice came in a ragged whisper, yet somehow I heard it clearly over the storm. "You're already marked." I stumbled backward, my boot scraping against a slick stone. The figure in the center shifted its immense weight, and the ground beneath me split with a cracking sound. Through the fissures, I saw not earth, but something wet, organic, tendrils, like the roots of a massive tree, but moving on their own. "If you leave, you'll take it with you." It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Suddenly, the roots surged upward. One lashed around my ankle, ice cold and slick. I went down hard, my head striking the stone with a sharp flash of light. When my vision cleared, I wasn't in the chamber anymore. I was back, in the cabin, only not quite. The walls were breathing, the wood creaked in and out, as if lungs were hidden behind the planks. The windows showed nothing but a flat, grey void. Every shadow in the corners stretched toward me, like spilled ink searching for warmth. I got to my feet, swaying, and realized the rope around my ankle was still there, only it wasn't a rope anymore. It was my own shadow, dark and impossibly heavy, dragging behind me no matter where I moved. There was a noise upstairs, slow, deliberate footsteps, even though the staircase had collapsed hours ago. I didn't want to look, but the sound came closer. One step, another, and then the thing appeared at the bottom of where the stairs should be, a figure shaped like me, but taller. Wrong, its joints bending just slightly the opposite way. Its face was in shadow. "Don't pretend you can leave," it said, in my voice. The storm outside roared, though I couldn't see the sky. My double began walking toward me, and with every step, the room grew smaller. The walls pushed in, the ceiling lowering until I could feel it brushing my hair. I backed into the farthest corner, hands trembling, until the wood behind me gave way, not breaking, but opening. I fell backward through a slit of lightless space, and cold air hit my face. I was falling, not down, but sideways. The sensation ended with a soft impact. I was standing on something that looked like stone but felt like flesh. Above me was not a ceiling but an infinite, black ocean, suspended in the air. Shapes swam in it, too large to fully see, their movements impossibly slow. A single drop fell from above, striking the ground at my feet. Where it landed, the stone flesh rippled outward, and I heard my own heartbeat echo, impossibly loud. And then I saw it at the far end of this place. The massive figure from the chamber was waiting, but it was different now. Thinner, its limbs stretched into almost human proportions. "You understand now," it said. I shook my head. No, I don't." It stepped closer, and as it did, the tether on my ankle tightened. I felt it not in my skin, but in my bones. Like my skeleton itself was leashed. "You'll leave, you'll think you've escaped. And then, in the quiet, in the dark, I will find you again." Behind it, I saw the tethered shapes from the chamber, now unbound, walking toward me. Their faces blurred in and out of features I recognized, friends, strangers, my own reflection. I turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The stone flesh floor stretched endlessly in every direction, and somewhere, far away, I could hear the sound of the cabin door creaking open. The creak of the cabin door echoed across the endless plain of stone flesh, louder than it should have been. It wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. The tether around my ankles snapped tight, yanking me forward so hard I nearly fell. My feet scraped against the warm, pulsing ground, dragging me toward that distant, invisible threshold where the sound came from. The massive figure didn't follow, it just stood there, hands clasped, head tilted slightly as if watching a child take its first steps. "You'll walk through," it said, the words vibrating in my skull, "and you'll believe you've returned. But the truth will already be inside you." I dug my heels into the surface, trying to stop, but the ground itself rippled forward beneath me. I wasn't walking anymore, I was being carried. The sound of the door grew closer, each creak now accompanied by a faint rush of wind. When I crossed the threshold, I was back in the cabin, except it was morning. The storm was gone. streamed in through the windows, and the air smelled clean, fresh, almost sweet. Outside, the mountains looked peaceful again, the way they had the day I'd first arrived. For a moment, I thought, maybe I'd imagined it, but then I saw the shadow, that it wasn't mine. It moved a half-second out of sync with me, lagging just enough that my breath caught in my throat. When I raised my hand, it followed, but its fingers were too long. I backed toward the door, desperate to put distance between myself and the thing that wore my shape beneath my feet. My hand closed around the doorknob, and I pulled it open, only to see myself standing outside. The other me smiled faintly. "You're not supposed to leave yet." The door slammed in my face from the outside. I staggered back, and when I looked again, the windows were black, not covered black like the glass opened into nothing. From upstairs, the footsteps started again. .1, .2, .3, slow, deliberate, patient. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. The air grew heavy, hard to breathe, and I realized the cabin walls were pulsing again, breathing. Faster this time. The footsteps reached the bottom of the invisible stairs. I couldn't see anything there, but I felt it watching me. "You brought it with you," the voice whispered. It wasn't mine, but it came from inside my head. "It will never leave." A sharp, cold pain lanced through my ankle, and I looked down to see the tether again. Only now, it wasn't a shadow. It was a vein. My vein. The thing inside me was connected, drinking. I screamed, clawing at it, but my fingers sank into my own skin as if it were clay. Something moved beneath it, shifting toward my chest. I fell to my knees, gasping, as the cabin seemed to tilt around me. The floor beneath me pulsed in time with my heartbeat, faster, louder, until I could barely hear anything else. The door creaked again, and this time, when it opened, the black void beyond was inviting. I knew I shouldn't step through. I knew it wasn't escape, but something inside me, something warm, insistent, pushed me forward. I crossed the threshold and I was gone. No final scream, no violent end, just absence. The cabin was empty again. But if you ever find yourself alone in the mountains, and you hear a door creak when there's no wind, you might want to run. Although, between us, it probably won't matter. No final goodbye, no happy ending, only this. No final goodbye, no happy ending, no final escape. No matter where you go, it will find you. No final warning, only truth. No final warning, only certainty. No final warning, only certainty. The world that we see maybe isn't all there is. Tell me what you think, and if you dare, come back tomorrow. There's always another story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end.